So the American writer Kurt Vonnegut famously gave advice to a high school class when they asked him to define a successful life. And we love this quote. His counsel, written to them in a letter, was this: practice any art, music, singing, dancing, acting, drawing, painting, sculpting, poetry, fiction, essays, reportage, no matter how well or badly, not to get money and fame, but to experience becoming, to finding out what's inside you, to make your soul grow. Woohoo! Yeah, I mean that, drop the mic, right? I mean, that says it all. I think that is so beautiful. So beautiful. If only we would have listened then. But, and so education and learning, we believe, are not the same thing. And learning across the lifespan through the arts offers profound impact, from enhancing brain neuroplasticity, structure and function, including impulse control, executive function, memory, formation and retrieval, resiliency, supporting neurodivergent brains, and so much more. And the data indicates that children who participated regularly in arts are less likely to develop social issues in their teenage years. Arts-engaged kids have fewer problems with their peers, teachers, and adults, and they are less likely to develop depression. I mean, we've known a lot of this for so long, but it's so important that this information get back out there, because how in the world, if we knew that, could we have kicked art out of school? It's just a crime. Susan and I spoke to the superintendents of California because they voted to put an art teacher in every school. And we begged them to not just check the box and get an art teacher, but have it be a mindset across education. So we humans are learners, and the arts are essential catalysts. We need to put ourselves in new experiences to strengthen and build new neural pathways. And to help you do that right now, please meet Kenna Anyajikwi, teaching artist at the National Jazz Museum, and followed by his engagement will be Deborah Rutter, president of the Kennedy Center, and she'll ignite this critically important conversation on learning with her panel. So please welcome Kenna.
Thank you, thank you. So I just want to make one quick correction. That said, oh, it disappeared. The National Jazz Museum, we're actually the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, specifically in Harlem. Yeah, and that's very, 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 very important, because we have a whole bunch of young people, from young people to old people, come into our space in Harlem, where we get to teach them about jazz music, but teach them about the history of when jazz music hits Harlem. So that's a very specific thing. And I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce our fearless leader, who is right there. Tracy, if you could stand up for a second. All right. So you guys ready to have some fun? That don't sound right. You ready to have some fun? All right, here we go. Everybody breathe in. Breathe out. Yeah. Breathe in that lunch, that great lunch we just had. Breathe it in. And breathe it out. Nice. So, to take us back to where jazz blues gets its roots from, which is Africa, let's all start by just humming your lowest note. Don't worry about being in pitch or being in harmony with each other. We're trying to make a heterogeneous sound with many different timbres, all right? So here we go. On the count of 3, just hum your lowest note. 1, and sustain it. 1, 2, 3, go. What a mighty instrument this room is, yeah? All right, so I'm here. We are going to be doing some scat singing. But before we get into scat singing, we're going to have a lot more fun. So everybody stand up. And we are going to be paying homage to, again, those wonderful African-American artists who created jazz, blues, all the wonderful music that we love. And we're going to do some things in the African-American music tradition. And this thing is called the stomp clap, all right? So it's based on that common time, 4/4. The quarter note gets the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, what we do in the African-American music community is we stomp on the 1, we clap on the 2, we stomp on the 3, and we clap on the 4. I'll repeat that again. We stomp on the 1, we clap on the 2, we stomp on the 3, and we clap on the 4. In the words of the brilliant, 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 may he rest in peace, Prince, never, ever, 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 ever do we clap on the 1 and 3. No. All right, so we're gonna take it slow, and then we're gonna add the element of call and response with the voice. So call and response, again, another tradition in the African-American music realm, where a leader, I will lead, I will sing something, and you just repeat after me. Again, this is about having fun and that timbre of that instrument, a very heterogeneous sound, all right? Here we go. We'll start off slowly, first with the stomp clap. Here we go. I'll count. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. You can put it all in your body. All right, here I go. Yeah, 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 yeah. You sing. Yeah, yeah, you sing. I said, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Good job. Give yourself a round of applause. You can take a seat, take a seat, take a seat. All right. So, just watching the events and hearing about being a part of this wonderful, wonderful conference, there's a lot of synergy with the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, because through our programs, what we do is we teach about how art is healing. And what do I mean by that? We teach about the history of blues and jazz. And if anybody knows the relationship between African Americans and blues and jazz, blues music was created to be a comfort, to ease the pain of oppression, slavery, all the terrible, terrible things African Americans have went through. So right now we're in a day and age, or a day and time, where African American music is the spotlight of the world, talking about jazz, pop, rock and roll, blues, all of it, the lineage of the blues. We have a thing in music where we say the blues is the root. Everybody say that? And everything else is the fruit. So we know off that lineage of the blues, we have rock, doo-wop, soul, R&B, hip-hop, punk, funk, all that stuff. And so it's very important to teach the history of this music and to get it out of especially young people's minds that it's just a commercial commodity. It is a part of healing. Picture 1800s, a young African American in a railroad station with just his guitar. Now, my blues is going to be a little bit more modern, going to be a little bit more like B.B. King. But imagine, same thing. Still have that shuffle rhythm. So just playing this rhythm. So that becomes a universal language all African Americans understand that as they walk past that African American male playing that. It becomes a place of healing. You can start singing about, oh, my woman done left me, and she even took the dog, right? Now, talking about something, again, that's really, really terrible, really, really hard, but that is the key to blues, which again becomes the key to African American music, is you sing about what ails you, and through doing that, giving voice to the problem, a wonderful thing happens. You start to feel better. The blues is healing. Yeah? So when you go back and you listen and you see that young person on the subway cranking up their hip hop, and the lyrics are terrible and they make no sense, it's still a part of the African American music tradition that you express the troubles in your community by speaking on them, you feel better. And that is the power of African American music, blues, jazz, so on and so forth. So now we get into the scat part. So scat singing is another important component of African American music. And the reason why is it's a key, it incorporates a key component of African American music, which is improvisation. Improvisation is very key to African American music. It is the key to the blues. It is the key to rock and roll. It's the key to jazz. So we all have a bass. We know the song. We know the song form. Normally know the melody. So right now, I'm going to pay homage to Duke Ellington, whose birthday, he would have been 125. That was in April. I'm going to play a little bit of Love You Madly. So I'll establish the melody. Love you madly, right or wrong, sounds like the lyrics of a song. But since it's so, I think you ought to know I love you madly. So right now, if I were on the bandstand, thank you. If I'm on the bandstand and I have an instrument, I know my scales, I know the song. Now I'm going to try to create something on the spot, which is improvisation. So now you have all the musicians, right? You have the musicians getting their turn, each getting to do their thing. And you have the singer on stage like, wait, I just got to keep singing the melody? Well, why can't I create something on the spot? So we get into scat singing, which is created. The myth is that Louis Armstrong was on the bandstand, Satchmo singing, and he's in the middle of a song, forgets the words, and creates scat singing. And if anybody has an appreciation of Louis Armstrong, we know that's 100% true. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start. I'm going to just scat something. And then we're going to silently in our minds in our seats, the next time it loops around, scat. Yeah? I'll do something. Here we go. Now scat in your head. Go for those notes. Play around. Make it messy. Nice. So now, what we're going to do, we're going to stand up. I just wanted to give you all a chance to try it by yourselves. Now we're going to do call and response, okay? So I'm going to just make up stuff, and you're just going to repeat after me, right? All right. Now, if you want to put that 2 and 4 in your body somewhere, get that groove. Yep. All right, I'll start off. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Zee doo 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 doo. Bop boop bop bop. Wee. Wee. Da da doo doo da. Bop boop bop bop. Yeah. Now, do we have any people in the audience who think that they can just come up here? Oh, the rule at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem is we never, ever pick somebody else. We do it first, and then we start pulling people up. We have anybody. Oh, woo, all right. Yes. Oh, we got a little one too.
Yeah.
All right. So let's give a hand.
Do you want me to just go ahead?
Just go
Make
ahead.
up some stuff?
Make up stuff.
Da 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 da. Ba da ba 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 bum. Ba da ba da bum ba 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 ba. Ba da ba da ba ba.
Woo! Anybody else want to try? Oh boy! Going up. I promise you, I didn't bring her. She just has a harmonica. That's all. All right. One last time, everybody up. Let's just have some fun. I'll just repeat something. Make up your own thing in the response, all right? Here we go. Da-doo-doo-doo. Bop, bop, boop, bop, bop, bop. Bitty, bitty, bibbity, bop. Woo, do-do-do-do. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Bibbidi-bibbidi-bop-bop. Zibbidi-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Yeah. So again, thank you on behalf of the National Jazz Museum in... Oh, can I hear that? National Jazz Museum in? That's right. We have a beautiful, beautiful space. It's about like half the size of this room. But we put up local artists every month. We have some of the most amazing jazz events, some of the greatest jazz musicians. Like I was just teaching a class the other day, and we had a musical component where a pianist comes in to support. And I'm like, all right, so I'm going to do my thing. I'm doing my spew. And this brother, he's playing. And I know the kids must have been like, what is going on with this man? Because I'm looking at him like, it's just amazing, amazing artist and a great energy at the National Jazz Museum. And there's such a synergy because we, again, preach music is healing. It's very healing. And especially as... well, I'll speak for myself as an African-American artist who gets to sing the blues and R&B and so on and so forth. In tough times, good times, sad times, music is always an ally. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth. That's fantastic. And I dare you to figure out when I'm scatting or not. My name is Deborah Rutter. I have the extraordinary privilege of being the president of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. And I'm thrilled to be here and learning so much about improv today. So we've been talking a lot and participating a lot. And I think that is exactly the story we want to tell. We at the Kennedy Center have been thinking a lot and feeling and having the inspiration on days like this. In some ways, we feel like it started about 9 years ago with Renee walking into my office and saying, here are the kinds of things I'd like to work on with you. But in fact, the Kennedy Center has been doing it, doing this kind of work, just didn't know really how to describe it and what we were expecting to have come from it. The intersection of art and well-being is something that's really important to me. Again, I didn't know really how to describe it until the last decade. And here we are, a reunion of friends and some new folks, which is important as our friend circle grows on this topic. Most folks know the Kennedy Center only as a place that presents a whole bunch of shows, 2,000 shows a year. We welcome a lot of people through those front doors and the garage doors too. We have education programs in all 50 states, plus DC and Puerto Rico, and we are the living memorial to John F. Kennedy, and we've been working hard to tell that story. Why was a president of the United States so dedicated to creating a performing arts center, a national cultural center? In fact, at the center, just this morning, we had 600 people doing yoga. Yesterday morning, we had hundreds of seniors coming before the matinee for the NSO Sound Health Experience, where they do a community sing, a movement, and do some of that good learning without even really knowing for sure what the outcome was intended to be. We've been doing Dance for Parkinson's for so many people, and it has been, I think, maybe 3 years that we've been doing it since we opened the spaces at the Reach. That's so popular, we're doubling the classes next year. There you go. In the fall, we're having an entire month around flourishing and nourishing, really expanding what does it mean about art and well-being. So this is an important conversation for me personally. I've always felt like art can save lives. Didn't know that we really needed to call it art for life's sake or art for non-arts outcomes or art and wellness, but this is what we are doing and thinking about and the way we're focusing a lot of our conversation. So there's a lot of data, research-based data, and a lot of what I'm now calling anecdata. Maybe you guys have all figured that out. People are asking me for what's the proof? Tell me how this means something. And I say, well, how many of you know the story of, and we all have that story. But I'm thrilled that we have experts here. I'm not the expert, I'm a connector. Thank you for that word earlier. I'm one of the connectors. And I'm thrilled to be here in conversation with them. So I'm gonna turn it over to them and ask them to introduce us and give us an overview of their work. So we have Ellen Galinsky first, Dan Levitin, Nina Kraus, Tom Sweitzer, all good friends. Ellen.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Ivy. Thank you, Diana. In the spirit of Susan and Rick and marriage, I'm going to start with a photograph of my husband's art. I actually picked it for a very special reason, because when Tiffany Shlain did a film about the adolescent brain, she picked Norman's work to illustrate the adolescent brain. Now, most of you wouldn't think of this as the adolescent brain, something so connected, so lively, so energetic, so exploring. I know that from my own research. We tend to think of the challenges when it comes to kids, and we know what the challenges are: the proficiency in learning, lack of engagement in learning, increasing number of kids struggling with self-regulation, according to teachers, and maternal health challenges. We've been talking about those all day. I will add the fact that I've done research in work and family life, and employers are always saying they're not learning the skills that we need to survive in the 21st century workplace. Allison James said that to me last night. I think it's so important. So I look to the science to begin to find out how do we help children learn and thrive, and continue to look to the science. And what I see across this research is that we unnecessarily separate learning, thriving, and creative expression or creative thinking. Now, what if, just what if, we had something that promoted all of these, both now and in the future? And that is actually a research slide. And we do. We have executive function skills. This is an umbrella concept that is around focus. Think of that as the umbrella. And there's so much evidence that these are important to us now and in the future, even more important than our RQ and our SES. So what are they? And if I ask you what they are, you'd probably tell me that are around compliance, they're around kids with ADHD, they're around other sorts of things that are challenging, but in fact, they bring together our social, emotional, and cognitive capacities. Everything that we learn intentionally is learned through executive function. So, they are the building blocks, these skills: using what you know, thinking creatively, reflecting, which is using that default network that we talked about earlier, and then using self-control, are the building blocks for the skills that I hear employers talking about most often. Let's just take a moment and look at problem solving. Creative thinking is integral to problem solving. You can't solve a problem, particularly the problems that we face in the world today, without thinking creatively, thinking differently, and taking on challenges. And these are, in fact, because I follow this survey every year, these are the skills that our employers are talking about. They're the most endorsed skills, like working in teams, being able to solve problems, and think creatively and analytically. These skills, we've mostly been talking about adults. I want to take us to children, because these skills are developed most importantly in the early years and then in the adolescent years. And that's the point of my new book, The Breakthrough Years. This is the time when these skills emerge in us. They have to be promoted, they have to be practiced, but we have the capacity to learn them throughout life, but particularly in those times of neuroplasticity. These are sensitive periods in development, and that's exactly what I'm doing now, to begin to translate these into skills that we infuse into education, working with AASA, the School Superintendent Organization. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dan Levitin. I've been interested in the neural circuits that underlie creativity and the creative brain. And I want to talk about what creativity is really briefly. Bruner says creativity evokes effective surprise. It requires novelty or originality and utility or usefulness, something new, useful, and non-obvious, according to the US Patent Office. Or what Steve Jobs had to say is that creativity is just connecting things. When you ask creative people how they did something, they feel a little guilty because they didn't really do it. They just saw something. They were able to connect experience they've had and synthesize new things. So following up on what you just heard from Ellen, the idea of connecting new things happens in the default mode network that you learned about earlier today from Indre. The default mode network is one of the modes of consciousness that is in opposition to being in complete control, the executive function. And I want to talk a little bit about that. The thing is that if you could solve a problem with your conscious brain, you'd be using your linear thinking. Your executive control center connects the dots. Many problems require that we make connections that we hadn't seen before. They're not linear. That's where the default mode comes in. My friend, Marcus Rakel, who happens to be a violinist, did the very first brain imaging studies. And one of the things he began to do with PET technology, he could see for the first time in human history catching pictures of the brain in the act of thinking. And one of the things he noticed was that when people weren't doing the task that he asked them to do, oftentimes, instead of the brain shutting down, the parts of the brain that he hadn't been monitoring would suddenly come alive. And he called that the default mode. Later, my colleague Vinod Menon, with whom I've done almost all my neuroimaging work, discovered the network that underlies the default mode, the actual network of circuits. You can see a little bit of them there on the right. The idea is that this is the network that trades off with the central executive. This is where creative problem solving occurs. We published the first paper, Vinod and I, showing where the switch is in your brain that actually takes you in and out. If you want to know, it's in a place of the brain called the insula. It's deep down in here. And what is the advantage of being able to get there? Well, some of the greatest inventions come from daydreaming. Some of the greatest discoveries, James Watson's double helix, Elias Howe and the automatic sewing machine, Elias Howe. Salvador Dali, Paul McCartney, and Billy Joel say that some of their best compositions came from dreams related to this daydreaming network. The default mode is not just for creativity, by the way, but for promoting healing, rest, and pain relief, as I wrote about in a New York Times op-ed. So the future directions in default mode network research that I think are crucial are to figure out, since music is one of the ways that we can get there. By the way, how do you get in the default mode? Music, art, engagement with art, either as a practitioner of it or as a consumer of it, walks in nature, some say drugs and alcohol, but a less toxic way is through the arts. And my interest in the whole problem is through the lens of music making and listening. What kind of music most facilitates entry into this creative and healing mode? And under what circumstances? We don't really know. We know that people have to choose the music they're going to listen to. Your doctor's not to write a prescription. He's not going to write a prescription, say you're depressed, take 2 Adele songs and call me tomorrow. That's or 2 Joni Mitchell songs or what have you. 2 Stevie Wonder songs. You have to like the music. You have to have an affinity for it. And so part of the problem in nailing it down is that everybody has different tastes. As my grandfather used to say, if everybody liked the same thing, they'd all want to get with your grandma. So it's because of all these different tastes that it's kind of a moving target, but we're homing in on it. The question is it better to be a listener or a performer of music? Both seem to be important. Both seem to work. And one of the keys here is that there are a lot of very musical people who are not musicians. Musical sensitivity is the key here. So future directions, if any of you are interested, what is my ask? My ask is to get involved with music listening and performing yourselves, because you can better understand it from the inside out, and then I think the future will manifest itself. Thank you very much.
All right. Hi, everybody. So, listen. Do you want to know a secret? So, I'm going to tell you some very little recognized things about sound. Sound is an incredibly powerful biological force, but we don't really recognize how important it is because it's invisible. And here are a couple of facts. So we have figured out how to measure sound processing in the brain with remarkable precision. And if you go to the home page of our website, you'll see that we study many, many different things. And it's all under the umbrella of sound and the brain. So one under-recognized thing is that sound touches almost everything we care about. Also, the hearing brain is vast. The hearing brain consists of our emotions, our visceral system, how we combine our senses, what we know. And this is, again, under-recognized. People think of hearing as something just involving the ear. So, did anybody hear any words in that? Here are the words.
The juice of lemons makes fine punch.
Now I'm going to play the first clip again. All right, so do you believe me that what we know about sound influences how we hear it? So of course, music is just the jackpot for this vast hearing brain. And we're always asked, what about music experience and does it transfer to other skills? Well, music is these other skills, inherently. So, we have discovered that we can predict in a little toddler how they're reading, if they're going to struggle to read just based on their brain's response to sound. We know that older adults are way better at making sense of sound if they have had a musical education, decades after music education has stopped. Now, we have studied brain responses in people for thousands of people, and one day, or a couple of days, I was approached by two founders of music programs, one in LA and one in Chicago, and they said to me, Nina, we all know that the kids who make music are the better students. The teachers just know this in our schools, what is going on in their brains. And so we began a study, and a longitudinal study where we followed kids year after year. And again, we have shown this again and again over the lifespan in people who make music, and I mean anyone who just regularly makes music. We know that in terms of sound processing in the brain, we know that the processing of timing and of harmonic cues are enhanced. And so this is something that we need not only for music, but for language. So here is what we can do when we measure sound processing in the brain is that we can take the electricity of the brain and play it out through a speaker, in the same way as this microphone is picking up my voice and delivering it through speakers. We can take the electricity from the brain and sonify that. So here is the sound of a brain. We can measure we can listen to the brain. Here is the sound of a brain with a music education. And here is his classmate who has not had a music education. So I want to leave you with another line of work that we're doing, which is on concussion. So making sense of sound is one of the hardest jobs that we ask our brain to do. And so you can imagine that getting hit in the head is going to disrupt this very fine processing of information. And so we've been testing all of our 500 Division I athletes at Northwestern University, and we have found that, in fact, concussion disrupts the hearing brain, and something that, again, is under-recognized. Whenever we get any publicity, people write to us and say, we had no idea that sound was... I had no idea. Ever since I had a concussion, I've had a hard time making sense of sound. So I want you to listen to a healthy brain. is a brain that has sustained a concussion. So where we are going with this, and kind of my ask to you, among many asks, is we want to know if music, especially rhythm, can improve concussion recovery. And we know that concussion desynchronizes the brain, and a rhythm, of course, synchronizes it. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tom Sweitzer. I am the co-founder of A Place to Be. We are America's largest nonprofit music therapy center that's not connected to a school or a hospital. We serve over 250 families per week, and we are 15 years old, and we are, I already said, a nonprofit. I spend a lot of my time fundraising because I'm very proud to say, in all 15 years, we have never turned a family away. So this is our mission. We help create community, belonging, and hope through music therapy, performance, and the expressive arts. We help a person become the fullest expression of themselves. We have a definition of a disability is anything that holds a person back from living their life to their fullest. We also see the whole family. So how A Place to Be came about, I am a survivor of abuse as a child. And when I was 8 years old, my father was schizophrenic and an alcoholic, and my mother was dying. I crossed the street in a little town called Altoona, Pennsylvania. I don't know if any of you have ever been there. Don't go. It's fine. It's a very nice place now. But I crossed the street when I was 8 years old because I heard the music pouring out of the stained glass windows. And I was met at the top of the steps by a Sunday school teacher who changed my life for good. And this is not, I'm not making this up. When the doors opened up, she looked at me and she said, "What took you so long to cross the street? We've been waiting for you." And this is the person that gave me a place to be. And that is why this exists. Each day we try to build a community. We learned when we started A Place to Be, we thought it would just be for people with disabilities, and then it became an education for our community. Our first year we had a Christmas recital where 50 people showed up. And this year, last year in 2023, I'm proud to say that we have to now rent out a big ballroom, and we have about 700 people that show up. And sometimes this audience waits for 2 minutes per client, if that's the best they can do. If they can hit a tambourine in the middle of Jingle Bells and it takes 2 minutes, they wait. And you cannot believe the applause and the happiness. We've been talking a lot about this today, belonging, that everybody deserves a place to be. And we believe that everybody should feel big on earth at least once in their lives. And through that, we also offer theater and the ability and the opportunity to perform. Because when you perform on stage, you have so many skills that you cover, from improvisation to expression to connecting. But the other thing that you have is the validation when you hear the applause, or as I'm standing here right in front of you right now, some of you are nodding, just to feel that you are validated, that you are listened to. I had the opportunity to be with Deborah and Renee years ago. We brought a rock opera called A Will to Survive to the Kennedy Center. We build musicals and plays from the real stories of our clients. A Will to Survive was about a young man who took his life in our local high school. His mother starred in that musical at the Kennedy Center. We toured over 150,000 students over 2 years. So music therapy is at the core of A Place to Be, and every client that wants to has a chance to perform. Oh, that's not yet. There we go. And so my ask is this, that when you see somebody, you know, it's not a surprise. We used to get phone calls all the time. My child has autism. My child has cerebral palsy, TBI. Now we get 3 phone calls for a day. my child has anxiety. My child doesn't know what to do. So what we try to do is create an inclusive environment where it doesn't matter what you're diagnosed with. You don't even have to have an IEP. You don't have to be diagnosed with anything. We want you to come in and be a part of us. So first, as I said, that somebody opened the door for me. There are so many amazing, smart, talented people. I want to play the harmonica, Nina. There are very talented and smart people in this room that we could be somebody to open the door for somebody else. That's my first ask. And two, my second and my last ask is a place to be. We're in Northern Virginia outside of DC. We call ourselves an incubator of love and hope. So we take a survey before and after your session or before your group or before your performance, and we see where you're on the scale. Do you have more joy than when you first started, before you started? So we ask for any partners that are interested in using us as an incubator. We have the people, we have the performances, we have the science-based, evidence-based music therapy going on. Very honored to be here. If you want to learn more, it's a place to be. I didn't put it up there, a place to be, va.org, and happy to talk to any of you. Thank you for having me.
No one should have to show up in a dress and sit in the high chair in front of people. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is my scat. So, as I mentioned, there's lots of research, and there's lots of data, and there's lots of anecdata. And thank goodness for that anecdata, because that's the part that gives you the tears. So thank you very much for that. I'd like to just start with Nina. I think, Nina, I've known you the longest, maybe you and Dan the longest, where we've really started understanding and doing the research on what happens to your brain. And that was fascinating because I hadn't heard any of the concussions part of this. So no more football, right? If that's possible. Talk to us about how you use what you're learning to educate people about what we need to know and the value to educators. How are you sharing that which you have learned through your research? Because it's just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, well, thank you. So communicating science is a big love of mine. In fact, I teach a class with that name. And when I wrote my book of Sound Mind, it really was my desire to put all in one place the various different studies that are by themselves in individual silos, but we like to, of course, intersect with them. And I take every opportunity to speak to, I gave my first sermon last week, in a church, libraries, different organizations, because people need to know about sound. And they are just, and we all want to do things that are good for our health, but we don't know what to do. I mean, you said that your patients call, or their parents call, I'm so anxious, I'm so stressed, I have difficulty focusing. Well, sound is our alarm sense, and we are in a state of constant low-level alarm, and we can do something about that if we just know about it. And the beautiful thing about sound is that when you turn it off, it's gone. But we need to value that. We need to create quieter air conditioners and hair dryers and vacuum cleaners. And the thing is that we've been making, the technology is there. We've been making quiet submarines since before World War II, and just look at an owl. An owl, if he wasn't going to starve, he has to jump down and get his little mouse, and if the mouse hurt him, he'd be famished. But the owl has a whole baffling system in his wing. So we can do this. We can do this, but we have to be aware of it. And so that's just one of many, many things. And to me, music, I always come back to music. Music is a way of life. Music is a way of life. And it can bring us so much health in our families and in our communities, in our hospitals.
So I'd love to use that, if I may, with you, Tom, because you're using music to help families who are struggling with an individual who's in deep stress, trauma. How do the families come to you? And the reason I ask that is because I know families who could benefit from Dance for Parkinson's that they don't even think about it. They think that they have to go somewhere else. How do families come to you? And are they more of the neurodiverse mental health issues or some traumatic?
So we have many neurodiverse, and we have not advertised yet in 15 years. So it really is word of mouth. Parents, especially of neurodiverse or anybody going through traumatic brain injury, your child is different, our waiting room. Deborah, I think that is the answer. Our waiting room. A parent sits there, a parent sits next to another parent, they go into the room, their child comes out happy. For a parent to see their child enjoy. And, we used to worry, like, we have charts, we keep data, but we used to worry too much about the data, and we would hand you, like, your child did this in the music therapy session, when honestly, most parents are in tears if their child comes out in joy and happiness. That's enough data for them. So really it happens right there, and it's parents meeting other parents that need love and acceptance of their child.
Does it take a long time, or do I come in for 60 minutes and I'm healed?
We would like you to be with us for as long as you can be with us. There's healing is such, it's that word, right? We hope that our healing, what we do is the moment you walk in the door, you're being healed by being loved. And then the music, yes, over time. And then we used to want to graduate people out. So if you started us at 8 years old, we really by 22 wanted you. So now, all of our 20, you guys know this, there's a huge gap from 18 on for the neurodiverse and anybody else. There's nothing out there, especially for the 26-year-old up. So now we make them the teachers and the mentors and the leads in our show. Yeah. And they feel like they have, they've gone in somewhere.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Dan, you were talking about the default mode, and in it feels a little bit like the silence between notes when you're listening to music. And I'm thinking about this because I spend a lot of time in a seat listening. I consider myself a professional concert performance attendee, but I also practice the piano. I'm a beginner, but I really... Tell me, is my brain working differently? And does that qualify? Am I getting my default mode? Is that my moment of creativity or my hours of creativity?
What a great question. There's a lot to unpack here. My default mode, when you were talking about how we have all this environmental noise, I got to thinking, and you were talking about the silence between notes. So they can make a quiet submarine. They can put a man on the moon. Why can't they make a quiet leaf blower? I think the difficulty is it's the people working on the submarine are not working on the leaf blower. It's a different they.
Yeah, but I think importantly, we have to learn to listen.
Yeah.
And we are losing that ability increasingly to listen.
Yeah.
And music helps with that. Sorry.
Oh, no, thank you. It's a conversation. You were referencing a study, very kindly referencing a study we did where we showed that when people were listening to classical music, their brains were most active when there was no music playing, the lack of sound between movements. That's when the default mode came alive and tried to figure out what's going to happen next. It was the creative brain. All of us, whether you know it or not, whether you're a musician or not, when you listen to music, your prefrontal cortex, probably a region called Brodmann Area 47, I didn't name it, Brodmann did, that's trying to figure out what's going to happen next. As we heard this morning, your brain's a giant prediction machine. It's trying to figure out what's going to happen next. And music is this wonderful game, this play for the brain, because we've got this scale system, we've got a history of listening. It can't just be any old thing that comes next, and your brain's trying to figure it out. And if a composer can surprise you with what comes next, violating your expectations, you can love that piece of music forever because it's been just a wonderful new learning experience. Oh, the music doesn't have to go where I thought it was going to go. Somebody more creative and ingenious than me finished this musical thought. And learning to play the piano is such an interesting example because I myself, at the beginning of the pandemic, made it my mission to become reacquainted with an instrument I hadn't touched in decades. And I'm wondering if our experiences were similar, that there was a lot of central executive, I have to put my fingers here, I have to play this note now and not later because it's the next one in the piece. But also a lot of moments of just, once it was under my fingers, I was no longer playing the notes. Somehow the music was playing
That's right.
me.
It's really true. It happens.
That is the default mode, and that's the beauty.
I will be thinking about that tomorrow morning. Thank you for that. Ellen, I'm least familiar with your work, but that is going to change really quickly because executive functioning is so important in our world. As an employer, I feel that. As a mother, I feel that. My daughter was diagnosed when she was in the 5th grade with distractibility, which is still called ADD, by the way, even though it's just distractibility. But she was a musician, and her executive functioning was so high, but she was distracted. It's fascinating, the work that you've done, because we need it as parents, we need it as employers. So tell me, I guess I was a good mother by giving her piano lessons and violin lessons, but what do we do with our employees? We're inheriting them in their 20s, 30s, 40s. I mean, this is fascinating.
Well, I want to start with kids because there are times that are prime times for teaching these executive function skills, and you'll notice that I include the default mode network and the cognitive control network. So reflection takes you back to the default mode and then cognitive control systems. So it's that toggle between that we talked about this morning and this afternoon that are so important. We can't separate them. They are bringing together our social, emotional, and cognitive capacities. And the schools are feeling it's so important that they need to change what they're doing, which is why I'm going to be working with school superintendents all over the country to infuse these into everyday activities. I think that if you want to teach them, there's a lot of research on how to teach them. In the beginning, it was just like teach working memory or teach cognitive flexibility, very one-task kind of orientation. And they need to be taught in real-life context. They need to be taught in situations that change all of the time, and you need to step back and reflect about what you're doing. So with an employee, you would say, look, you're using this skill now. These are skills that's like learning to ride a bicycle. You have to practice, but you also have to be conscious of it, and then you can become less conscious of it.
I can't wait to work with you in the Department of Education. We're going to go see the Secretary of
We
Education.
are, absolutely. I'm right with you.
That is going to be exciting.
On my way.
Woo-hoo.
Good
Okay,
conference.
thank you. We're out of time. Fantastic talking with you.